All right, everyone. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you may be around the world today. I'm Paul Saunders. I'm a senior advisor at Energy Innovation Reform Project. Thank you very much for joining us today for this discussion of China's electric vehicle battery dominance and U.S.-South Korea cooperation in addressing that. Very pleased to have with us today two distinguished academics, each of whom has written papers on the topic for Energy Innovation Reform Project. I'd encourage everyone to take a look at those papers on our website at www.innovationreform.org. We will start first with David Gattie. David is Associate Professor of Engineering at the University of Georgia's College of Engineering, the School of Environmental, Civil, Agricultural, and Mechanical Engineering, and he's a resident fellow at the university's Center for International Trade and Security. Importantly, also, he has a background that really blends private sector experience as an engineer with academic work at the university. David, please take it away. Take it away.
Thank you, Paul. And it's good to be with you and also with you, Younkyoo, on this webinar. I appreciate the invitation, Paul, particularly the opportunity to write that paper. Let me first recognize, too, my co-author, Chase Duncan. Chase was a graduate student of mine in our Master of International Policy program at the Center for International Trade and Security, and Chase did a yeoman's work on this article. It's something that he and I both have been really attuned to over the past several years. We've had several, and still do here in the state of Georgia in the U.S., have several ties with South Korean industry in EVs, in batteries, and in solar panels. So this was of particular interest to us here in the state of Georgia, and of course, more broadly in the U.S. I think, to just get started, it's the dominance that China has acquired here in this EV and battery space, I think, is becoming increasingly evident. I think part of the issues that we are thinking through here in the U.S. is, in particular, with respect to their state-owned enterprises, how does the U.S., being a capitalist country, how do we respond to this? And of course, one of our primary responses that we see is to work more closely, very closely, with our allies. And in this case, we see South Korea as one of those key allies. China's growth in the market space here for producing EVs and batteries right now, they are essentially the largest EV market. In 2022, they sold about 4.4 million EVs, over 3 million more than the rest of the world. They are a domestic market as well. Of course, we understand, too, that they are pursuing mineral resources across the global south. It's Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia in particular, lithium, nickel, and cobalt. It's one of the, I think, more interesting ones here is the nickel aspect of this, nickel being a key resource for energy density and storage capacity. China's efforts, particularly in Indonesia, I think they've had over $14 billion of investment for the past 10 years, which, if you look at Australia, Canada, South Korea, and the U.S., it's 10 times the investment that we have put in combined. We're also looking at cobalt production there in Africa and the DRC and China's dominance in that space as well. But maybe to just boil it down and transition over to Younkyoo, we are really concerned about the geoeconomics here, the political and economic influence, political pressure on countries that are importing materials, on countries that are producing the battery minerals, on rival mineral producers, countries that China might perceive as threats to their own industry, and what their response is going to be geopolitically and economically. So we see this geopolitical risk as a serious threat to the EV battery industry domestically, globally as well. We don't currently have the reserves and production capacity to respond to this unilaterally, which is why we see countries like South Korea in particular, as what we consider to be a key, critical, important partner in how we respond to this. So I'm gonna shift it over and transition now, let Younkyoo have it, take it away, and I look forward to the follow-up comments.
Okay. Can I?
Sorry, Younkyoo, let me briefly introduce you also before
Sure.
you start.
Right.
So Younkyoo Kim is the Dean of the School of International Studies and the Graduate School of International Studies at Hanyang University. He's also the director of the Hanyang Institute of Energy and the Environment at the university. And the founder and director of the Center for Energy Governance and Security at the university. And he's worked for many years on energy security issues, really across the board, including now in this area of electric vehicles and batteries. Younkyoo, thank you very much, please.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to this important event. I'm glad that we have, audience from two countries across the Pacific. The report that I wrote for the EIRP, at the writing of my report and the event today seems to, lots of things happened between the writing of the report and today's event. Therefore, I'm sorry that my report doesn't reflect changes, a lot of latest changes. Today, I'd like to stress a couple of points. What we do, I think, today is to kind of revisit the impact of the IRA on the general global EV battery supply chain, especially the impact on the integration of South Korea and US battery supply chain. So the IRA, I think, that is driving integration of both countries' battery supply chain, and mainly because of the IRA is altering the cost economics of battery manufacturing. So what I'm trying to say, I think, is that much seems to have changed, but at the same time, because there is a flurry of gigafactory announcements after the IRA, kind of a change in direction of investment away from China into the United States. According to some reports, to the year 2030, there will be approximately 40 different gigafactories expected to be constructed in the United States. To the year 2025, at least 13. In terms of capacity, this equates into 800 GWh by the year 2025, and 1.2 TWh to the year 2030, which is a lot of battery manufacturing will be taking place. And South Korea will be responsible for a major share of this additional capacity, all due to the alteration of cost factor, because the IRA kind of provides at least 30% discounts on the manufacturing cost. In other words, the US-based high-capacity nickel battery kind of carries a cost advantage against imported Chinese-produced LFP battery. So what I'm writing in my report is that the South Korean companies kind of complying with this kind of cost factor changes introduced by the IRA. But at the same time, what I like to discuss today, I think, is that much seems to have changed, but at the same time, much seems to remain. In other words, to get around these maybe loopholes in the IRA, maybe we could discuss what are the loopholes, how could fill the gap in the current IRA, because there has been many get around by China. In other words, Chinese companies investing overseas to get around IRA, including South Korea. So what I'd like to discuss today is that there are several stages. Kind of what we do today is to go over kind of 2 years on revisiting of the IRA, because the first proposed guidance came out, I think, March 2023. After that, there have been several stages. The latest stage, I think, was something the FEOC was released by the Department of Commerce. So we have to discuss the changes, like calculations by different companies and two governments surrounding the release of FEOC towards the end of 2023. Furthermore, I think this I think I missed in my report. The most important, I think, variable of late, I think, is changes in the EV battery market, electric vehicle market, because the electric vehicle market in general is in down cycle. So this changes a lots of different, equation calculations. So we need to further discuss the post-IRA developments, how they are impacted by this current EV market. Because, at the moment, due to the market changes, I think South Korean 3 battery companies lost market shares to CATL and BYD and other China battery companies combined. So, and China became officially #1 EV exporter as well. So what this changes our conventional understanding of post-IRA development and the projection of America, like a 50% EV sales by 2030. So do we keep this, a projection even after these market changes? So I'd like to propose these kind of questions for debates today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Younkyoo. That's certainly a powerful question. I think we always have to re-examine forecasting and the foreign entity of concern rule that you raised, blocking eligibility for the tax credit if there are companies in the supply chain, from China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea. That's also quite important. That's a fairly complicated set of rules, but I think the intent of it is certainly very apparent. As we get going here, I'd like to encourage anyone listening to send in questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. Please submit those, and I'll try to move through those expeditiously as they come in. But, perhaps just to get us started here, let me ask, one question of each of you. This is a discussion, obviously, that's focused on the U.S.-Korea relationship. It's something that this project, the larger project here, is something that Energy Innovation Reform Project was able to do with support of the Korea Foundation, for which we're quite grateful. But what's so special about the U.S.-Korea relationship in the context of this electric vehicle and battery discussion? What's unique that makes this more important, or why has it become such a central focus of discussion, rather than Germany, which makes a lot of vehicles, or some other combination of countries? Younkyoo, perhaps you, and then David.
Yeah, the way I look at it, I mean, why Korea, right? What the place of Korea in the US-led, like a revamping global supply chain of EV, and how this will, I think, impact future US-Korean relationship vis-a-vis, China or Russia or North Korea. Clearly, I think this industrial or technology issue, I think, entangles with other, military and general security, relations. The way I look at this, what interests me about current state of, EV or, battery-related US-Korea relationship, I think is, I'd like to remind you of what happened over the last, 50, 60 years, like regarding oil and gas, relationship. When oil and gas was the mainstay of energy sources, 50, 60 years ago, Korea was deficient in energy supply. What Korea had was, human talent and maybe manufacturing capacity. But what we didn't have was energy sources, energy supply. So we kind of came under the protection by the kind of energy umbrella by the United States, and the US made sure that South Korean or Japanese or German economies can go under the protection of US Navy supply routes, because oil and gas was kind of blood in the economy. And today we can draw some analogy what's happening today, but the antagonists have changed. Kind of China is there. Back then, Saudi and Russia was there. But the analogy, I think the logic of, Korea-US relationship, or Japan related, or German involved, I think the logic is very much the same. Very much the same. Today, I think major industries will be, automobiles, semiconductors, and maybe, many more, drones and others, those high-tech industries. and raw materials will be critical minerals. And same goes for Korea. I mean, we do not have internally extracted those materials. And then China sort of put an injunction or disrupts supply. And then we kind of seek some support. Then the US extends, allied kind of support. So in this respect, I think the logic is very much the same, very much the same. This is like critical minerals, lithium and others. It's like a blood for industries and for economies. And battery industry, EV industry provides, I think, at least a quarter of Korean exports. Quarter of, Korean exports. And semiconductor, I think, even more. So that's how, the raw material and industry, how they are connected.
Right. Right. I see. David, do you have anything that you would add on kind of the uniqueness of the U.S.-Korea relationship in this area? I mean, certainly Korea has, three of the world's top battery making companies. But other points that you would make about this kind of somewhat unique partnership.
Yeah, I do, Paul. And I apologize for my throat. I got a little bit of a cough, but I'm taking cough drops, so I'm trying to muffle it. So in the many conversations that I've been involved in with Korean partners coming to the state of Georgia in particular, and also in the more broader context of the energy sector conversations I've had. So, Paul, it was interesting you mentioned, why South Korea as opposed to something like Germany, a country like Germany.
Or Japan, for that
Or
matter.
Japan, right. Right. In the conversations that I've had, I think one of the commonalities, at least that we've had here in the state of Georgia in our conversations, has been a like-mindedness on why are we doing this. If a state like California was involved in this, their objective would be carbon reduction and climate change. That would be their kind of their theory of victory they'd be looking to. Georgia, while not dismissing the climate issue or carbon reduction, we are looking at this as an industrial development, manufacturing, jobs, economic growth. And the Korean partners that we've been talking with are also seeing it similarly. They also not dismissing climate change, not dismissing the importance of reducing carbon emissions. They still nonetheless are seeing this as a long-term energy issue. And Younkyoo, to your point, South Korea not having oil and gas reserves, the U.S. does, not having mineral reserves, the U.S. has some. I think what we're seeing here is a real commonality around this being an economic development effort, perhaps more primarily than it being a carbon reduction effort. And I think we see some affinity there with the Koreans in that regard. I think we might also would see the same thing if we were talking with a country like Japan. But I think the history here in particular with South Korea gives us a little bit of with regard to their location and their history with China and so forth. I think there are some commonalities there that we have an affinity around, again, that are more enduring and longer lasting and more aligned with what our countries are looking for. We are looking at this as being an economic competitive issue with China, first and foremost. I think that's what the partners that we've seen from Korea are also seeing it as well, competitive advantage, as opposed to prioritizing this as a climate initiative. That's one of the issues perhaps that I have kind of with the, with some of the Biden policies, is just prioritizing climate and carbon reduction over the allied partnership with strategic partnership around security issues with countries like Korea.
Thank you, David. And you certainly point out in your paper as well that while the U.S. and Korea had kind of a at times painful experience getting there, we do have of course a U.S.-Korea free trade agreement. The vehicle part of that was not an easy part to negotiate, but that's in place, and I'm sure a big factor too. So I encourage our attendees to submit questions. We have one question from Luis Silva Pinto, who asks, how could Brazil's raw materials and manufacturing potential play a partnership role in the U.S.-Korea EV relationship? And he's asking, he says, as an American-Brazilian entrepreneur. Maybe we can start in this instance with David and then go to Younkyoo.
Okay.
David, thoughts on Brazil?
I had to find my mute button there. Brazil, again, that's, I think I'm wondering if the person that asked the question is actually from Brazil or not, or wherever they may, I'm not sure where they may be from, but
he mentioned that he was an American-Brazilian entrepreneur. Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Question, yes.
Okay, I think that those are, and in fact, I'm pretty sure that we even included it in our paper that Brazil is one of the target countries that China has been focusing on as well. So I think that his point is important, particularly with regard to the global South, that China has been making a lot of inroads in that space. Our response has not been, I don't think has been adequate in that regard. So I think one of the problems, or one of the issues that we're dealing with, is just how do we make up the time and the space? I mean, it's been such a lag to what was his I'm trying to, his question is gone. What was his name, Paul? I'm sorry.
Luis Silva Pinto.
Luis.
Yes.
To Luis's point, I think Brazil does present us with an opportunity. I think part of the issue, though, is how does the U.S. and Korea coalesce around that opportunity? And is this going to be a U.S.-Brazil bilateral, or are we going to be able to create a trilateral association? I think that's actually part of what we need to work out with our Korean counterparts, is how do we have bilateral, trilateral, multilateral minerals and reserve collaborations with countries that are rich in these particular resources. So I think the short answer to his question is we do need that relationship with Brazil. We need a strategy, though, as to what it is we're actually trying to accomplish. And also, what are we going to offer Brazil in return? Is it, are we going to be able to demonstrate to Brazil that we're not going to establish these partnerships and ensure Brazil that we're not going to do it the way China has done it in the past, where it's more of a one-way benefit with some benefits trickling in the other direction? So I think we need to be very clear-eyed ahead of time as to how we're going to ensure that Brazil is also going to benefit from that partnership.
Thank you, David. Younkyoo, your perspective on Brazil.
Thank you for the question. We need to look at this question from the perspective of how, like, America designs the IRA law. If you read the law stipulates that, the battery materials and components, how battery materials are, mined, processed, and manufactured, into components, and battery materials, where and how they are mined. They distinguish these two kinds of things, components and materials. And we need to distinguish from the US and allies perspective, distinguish countries regarding battery supply chain. We have two groups of countries. We have groups of countries that provide manufacturing base for components, mostly North America. And in terms of battery materials, I'd like to say there is a scramble among countries over battery material producing countries, mostly Africa, Southeast Asia, or Central Latin America. Brazil is one of them. Brazil, I think, in terms of building, non-China battery supply chain, I think there is a kind of competition between China and kind of a non-China Western countries. For Brazil, I think Brazil has abundant sources of lithium. In terms of sourcing lithium, we are discussing how to comply with IRA rules. Therefore, we need to extract countries that have FTA relations with the United States. But Brazil doesn't have an FTA relationship. So therefore, even if Brazil has abundant sources of lithium, in terms of Korean companies, in terms of sourcing lithium, we need to think. We need to think in terms of extracting lithium from Brazil, and then maybe get it all the way to South Korea and get it refined, processed, and then put it into battery, and then ship it to the United States. Because, according to IRA, according to proposed guidance, what matters is not where it is mined. It matters more is where it is refined. So kind of Argentina is kind of similar to Brazil because, Korean company POSCO mines lithium in Argentina. But because Argentina doesn't have an FTA relationship with the United States, we are thinking shipping, extracted lithium, ship it to Korea and then get it refined and then ship it back to the United States. So in terms of complying with IRA, I think Brazil will take this kind of step.
Thank you.
Can I make one?
Sorry, David, please.
One quick comment. Yeah. So Younkyoo agree with everything you said. One of the things, just as I just reflect back on Indonesia and their nickel capacity, to the point I was making about ensuring that Brazil, because Indonesia pushed back really hard. They didn't want to just simply be a country that people came in and mined in. They wanted to be a little more in the supply chain, in that process chain. So I think it's going to be important for us as we develop, and hopefully we will develop this supply chain, Younkyoo, with the US and Korea and other key partners, where we enrich countries like Brazil in that supply chain so that they aren't strictly a supplier, but that they're also maybe perhaps engaged in that refinement I don't know to what extent, because to your point, yeah, I
Right.
mean, somebody's going to have to become the efficient partner in that process. But I think it's going to be important for us to ensure to make sure that the host countries see us as having them fully engaged, or as much as engaged as possible, in that supply chain, so that they can reap the monetary benefits of a just more downstream benefits as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Another
sorry.
thing I'd like to add, or another thing that I'd like to add
Please.
about Brazil, I think, is that Brazil, I think, is a huge country in terms of, not just, battery materials, critical minerals, huge potential for EV manufacturing and EV adoption. Therefore, I think, because, EV battery supply chain, in my view, over the last several years, changes are very much, quick in terms of even we cannot adapt to. Therefore, once, China began exporting EVs, these are really, kind of markets that China is looking to. Brazil, Indonesia, maybe Mexico. Mexico is even more important in terms of, route to get into the US market. So Brazil, I think, is important in terms of not just, providing raw material. Maybe Brazilian strategy will be, as David said, Brazilian strategy will be leveraging raw material abundance to become a manufacturing, kind of a EV manufacturing hub. So that's kind of another thing that we need to consider, along with Indonesia. That's kind of a route Indonesia is taking, like a leveraging nickel raw material abundance by putting a ban on export of nickel. Indonesia looking to like getting, riding the ladder of, nickel supply chain, like a downstream, more downstream. So Brazil, I think, is one of those countries.
And Younkyoo, I think it also just helps build in some redundancy in that supply chain. That is, it keeps it from becoming too brittle or too centralized or condensed around particular countries able to do only a particular thing. I think some redundancy in that supply chain is going to be really important down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, David. So moving on here, we have a question from Younkyoo Kim. How do you think the governments of the United States and Korea could cooperate in dealing with the Chinese challenges in the EV battery market? This should be an economic security matter. That the question concludes. So, the two of you already pointed to a couple of things, I think, just as the conversation has been going along here. One is certainly Korean investment in the United States, in manufacturing here. David touched on that. And Georgia's role specifically. Younkyoo, you kind of referred to Korea's ability as an American free trade partner to be sort of a hub for processing some of the critical minerals and manufacturing batteries and sending those to the United States. So I guess first,
Sure.
What other areas did the two of you see,
Sure.
If any? And then secondly, there's one other element that I think the discussion so far kind of draws out, and that's the fact that on one side, we have China, which is really trying to build a largely vertically integrated domestic supply chain. Obviously, they're importing minerals, but much of the rest of the process is happening there. And on the other side, those attempting to compete with China, we're building this sort of network of, some people would say like-minded countries or friendshoring or whatever. But we're doing it in an environment in which, I think it was David, you pointed out, that everyone wants to capture domestically the value added parts of the process. So we're cooperating, but we're competing at the same time. So I would welcome perspectives from the two of you on, what other things can we do to cooperate. And then at the same time, how do we contend with kind of this very real, economic competition among, the US and Korea and Japan and Germany and others to make EVs, among the US and Korea and Japan, to make batteries. Among many others, to process the battery materials. Maybe starting with you, Younkyoo, and then going to So and if we could try to be a little brief so we can get through the questions.
Sure. As I mentioned early on, I think South Korean weak spot in terms of energy is the lack of raw materials and resources. That is repeated on this stage of industry, on this stage of 21st century type of economic security. Korea is, I think, the US and South Korea, they exchange what they do better. South Korea does better on cell manufacturing in the supply chain of EV battery. South Korea does it much better because, America, in terms of supply chain, America and maybe Europe, they concentrate on designing and maybe assembly and more high value added, OEM kind of, manufacturing, EV manufacturing or, automobile manufacturing. South Korea does a particular link in the supply chain, which is cell manufacturing. Instead, the upstream, more upstream part of mining and refining and precursor, PCAM done by China. And South Korea, all the while, I think, depended pretty much on China, down the precursor, all the way, down to mining. Now, the way things develop, specialization doesn't work anymore because China began with mining and refining, processing, and maybe precursor. Then at the moment, as I mentioned in the very early part of our discussion, China expanded into even EV manufacturing. So what I think interests us, I think, is that by kind of monopolizing on low value added, even mining or refining, mining, accounts for only 2%. Only 2% in terms of value addition in the entire supply chain. Maybe, automobile manufacturing assembly takes for major share of the value addition in throughout the supply chain, maybe, more than 50%. But this current, conventional wisdom no longer working. because America and Europe is losing this advantage. This past advantage is slipping away for the US and Europe. So the lesson I think here is that America and South Korea, they need to recalibrate, looking at the separate different steps in the global supply chain, because South Korea is lacking raw materials. That's very clear. And America is lacking manufacturing. So I think this ties together South Korea and the United States confronting China. But the problem is, as I mentioned, due to the latest change in the EV battery market, China even expanding even more into the downstream. So I don't know how this will change South Korean-US collaboration. Since this change is so rapid and so recent, I don't know. I mean, this change is totally 2021 Biden's projection of 50% of EV penetration by 2030. So I don't know. I mean, the first up, South Korea and the US, they have kind of a common interest in rebuilding global supply chain away from Chinese monopoly. But how to tackle it, we need to kind of recalibrate, because so many things have changed, even since the writing of the proposed guidance. I don't know whether even FEOC will be sufficient to tackle the current challenge. But to repeat again, South Korean shortage is in the raw material.
Right.
American shortage in the manufacturing.
David, your thoughts?
So Paul, I think I'll make a few bullet points. I think what we're facing, this competition with China, for one, I don't even know if we have a precedent for it. If we do, we're out of practice. We are competing with a vertically integrated country, and we don't know how to do it right now. I don't know that we ever have done this in the past. We didn't do it with the USSR. China, and to Younkyoo's point, China is able to do things rapidly. We are trying to respond by doing things rapidly with things like tariffs. I don't think the tariffs are an approach. I don't even think a tariff is a strategic response at all. I think it's a tactical reflex, and it's not going to have long-term systemic changes like some may hope. That is, a tariff is a political response. It's not a strategic response. So I think, for one, we need to not look at tariffs as a solution, or even part of the solution up front. Secondly, and again, Younkyoo pointed this out, I think we have a near-term thinking problem. That is, we've got targets, dates of things like 2030, 2035, and I realize for somebody who's 64 years old, that's burning the low end of the candle there. But that is a very short time frame for trying to retool a 130-year-old industry. I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can do that. So I think our time span here is far too short. Secondly, I think we're making a major mistake by not including our power sector in this. That is, for there to be a market demand for these EVs, to pull on this manufacturing, to draw people into the public has to know that there's going to be an infrastructure for them to be able to drive these cars around extended lengths. We're struggling in the U.S. with not only trying to transition our our transportation from internal combustion engines to EVs. We're trying to do that with our power sector as well. So I believe we need to be more integrative with this EV industry that we're trying to develop and our power sector to ensure that we do this again coordinatedly and strategically. When I think about South Korea, and if I'm thinking about domestic EV consumption, that is buying more and more EVs, I think right now Korea is about 80% natural gas. I may be off a little bit, but I think that's what it is. How in the world that fares under a low or zero carbon power sector, I don't have a clue. So I think that disconnect and trying to deal with EVs alone as some standalone industry that's not connected with the broader power sector is something we're going to need to address so that we can get the demand signals out there to create a market for these products. So first off, I don't necessarily agree with the tariffs as being an appropriate strategic response. And I think we're going to have to give ourselves much more time to get this done. This is not going to be a 10-year venture here.
Thank you, David. I would just note on the tariffs from my own reading and writing on that point. You know, there are a couple of Chinese EV models that are selling domestically in China for $10,000, $12,000. The average price of U.S. EV models, not vehicles, but models, is over $70,000. 100% tariff that the president just put in, from that perspective is not really quite enough, and I'm not sure that a 500% tariff is realistic. But
we used to say the same. We used to say the same thing about nuclear plants. If we want to build a nuclear, if we say $100, China will say they'll do it for 50 cents.
Exactly. So we've got 4 questions. We've got 7 minutes.
Oh.
I'm gonna read the 4 questions and then together.
Okay.
And I'll ask each of you very briefly to answer as many of them as you can. First, Bektosh Abduazizov asks, does the IRA promise game-changing progress in the U.S. battery supply and the close partnership with Korea, given that China is dominating that industry? So is our goal achievable, I think is the question there. Then Brian Chong actually has a couple of questions. One, are there cooperative efforts on seawater extraction or other technological approaches to getting lithium? Can you make lithium in a lab with nuclear science? And then he asked separately about the dynamic between electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles. And what do we see there? And then finally, just your longer term outlook on all of this.
Okay.
So I'll give my quick response here to the first one there, Paul, on does the IRA promise a game-changing progress? I'm going to say that it does not promise a game-changing progress in this. Again, I think it's trying to take a pretty quick near-term approach to it, maybe trying to provide some stimulus, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be game-changing. As far as efforts on the lithium, seawater extraction, and the nuclear science, Brian, I know that it's out there. I think it's cost prohibitive at this point when it's compared with just your standard mining. On the hydrogen vehicles, EVs and hydrogen vehicles, I think if we only look at it as an end game product as far as a vehicle, our concern again, I think would back up into how we're going to be able to supply that hydrogen to those vehicles, as far as pipeline capacity goes. And then let's see, how do you think those type of challenges? I'm not sure that last question, Paul.
I'm not, sorry, I'm not entirely sure
Yeah.
either, but perhaps just your sort of outlook very
Outlook.
briefly
Yeah.
Okay.
on the competition. Oh, sorry, or
Kim.
maybe, yeah, okay, Younkyoo.
Yeah. Maybe, you know, the general message that I was going to deliver today, I think, is that the IRA, I think, changed global battery supply chain and kind of drove integration of both countries' battery supply chain. In this respect, I think the IRA opened a new chapter in the history of at least, you know, the U.S. Battery industry. But at the same time, the goal of kind of U.S. and South Korea catching up with China, it's not insurmountable goal, but it's a lot of work. In my own words, at the moment, to draw an analogy, baseball game analogy, at the moment, I think China is having at least kind of a 8-1 lead in the first or second inning. So if we get to the year 2025 or 2030, again, drawing baseball analogy, 2025 will be probably 5th inning. 2030 will be 9th inning. So how the game will end, maybe that's kind of the outlook for the competition. You know, my take on this will be not just because of the IRA, but you need to consider, you know, geopolitics, technology development, not just, you know, hydrogen or electric vehicle technology or seawater, lithium, but if you include kind of a lithium metal, you know, battery, not just lithium ion battery. So consider geopolitics, technology development, or, you know, kind of a changing battery cost curve. It's a very complex game, but my take on this will be that America kind of catch up. So by 2025, at least I think 5 to 10, narrowing the gap, maybe 5 to 10. China will be still leading, but we'll see how this will change by 2030. Whether America will come from behind and win by 11 to 10.
All right.
That's my kind of projection for outlook. And about EV and hydrogen vehicle, well, this is a very interesting question because the way the EV market goes today, if you look at you know, stock market today, you know, Toyota, their stock price is kind of you know, going up very quickly. And Tesla, you know, decline. What that means is that Toyota, I think, is betting on hybrid, not pure EV. Or, you know, Toyota betting, I think, in the long term, hydrogen vehicle. According to some high-level official inside Toyota, by 2030, EV can take up at most 30% of the vehicle market. The remaining portion will go to hydrogen and others. So we never know how technology will evolve, but we need to take this into consideration as well. So
Terrific. Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time and thoughts today, and also for your papers. And of course, David, thank you also to your co-author, Chase Duncan. Thank you to our audience for taking part. I think we've had a really terrific, wide-ranging discussion, and I'm sure there's more to come. So,
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Paul, and it's great to meet you, Younkyoo.
thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.